only fitting that we bring on our special guest for today, the one, the only, Entertainah Talking Sports. Chris, how's it going?
Yeah, man, I would have brought the Met gear on, but I'm doing a Giants live at 8:40, so I didn't change my clothes. But I'm super excited to come on and talk baseball. I don't talk, I do the Met live streams every now and again, but I don't talk a ton of baseball, and I'm a diehard New York Mets fan. So when you reached out to me, man, I was looking forward to it.
Oh, absolutely. I had a lot of fun talking some New York Giants with you 1 year ago on Big Blue Avenue. And I know you've also talked with my buddy Tom about probably during the offseason. So I've been wanting to get you on the show for a while to talk some Mets. I know that's probably the one area with our teams where we differ. But in any event, thank you again for taking the time. And, let's get right into it. You had that first inning. It's been one of the most interesting that I've ever seen. And I figured it was going to be one of those wild and crazy innings. Start off with the Judge and Rizzo back-to-back home runs. And then, of course, the Mets bounce back with 4 runs in their own. Take me through your mind. What were you thinking as that whole everything was going down?
Yeah, the first inning, Taijuan Walker's been great for the Mets all year, but I had a feeling, he's taking a step up in competition. I thought the Yankees would come out and, get after him quick, and that's exactly what they did. And after that first half inning, I was like, oh, this is going to be a long day, because you see Judge go opposite field. He hits an absolute missile. The same thing for Rizzo. One thing I'll say about the Mets, though, all year, even though they have kind of been going through like a skid over the last 30 games or so, 40 games offensively, they've had that MO, for the first 2.5, 3 months this year. They're a scrappy team, man, and they find ways to bounce back. They get timely hits. And the thing that I love about this Mets offense is how multidimensional they are. They could beat you in so many different ways. They have speed, they have power. Obviously, they're known more so for the contact, but they could score runs in so many different ways, and you saw that in that first inning.
Yeah, definitely. And before I get to my next comment, we've got a few comments, and very fittingly from Tom and Sam. First of all, Tom goes, "Happy birthday, Tyler McGill. What's up, Chris?" And by the way, before I get any further, I just want to wish a big happy birthday to Tom Scavetta, the main man of Review and Preview Sports, and of course, my co-host at Big Blue Avenue. So, Tom, happy birthday. Hope you're enjoying yourself today, and enjoy 27.
Yeah, man. Happy birthday, Tom, man. Absolutely.
And of course,
really
the
nice
other comment.
So
Our other comment is from my other co-host at Big Blue Avenue, Sam Cardano. Look at these two. What's up, guys? And I know you have also had interaction with Sam on her channel, The Girl Who Talks Sports.
Yeah, she's awesome. She's really nice. I really like Sam.
Oh, she's the best. And anyways, moving on. So looking at Taijuan Walker, from what I saw in this game, it didn't look to me like he had his best stuff. But you know what? He gutted through this game. He got some of the outs that mattered. And Chris, I don't know about you, but I think the real turning point in game 1 of the series wasn't so much the 4-run inning that you guys had, but I think it was IKF getting picked off at first base, because the Yankees had runners on first and third, 1 out, as we got that fire truck coming by. Jeez, I got to close my window. Sorry about that.
But yeah, no, to go back to your point about that was a huge play, him getting picked off first base. And there was a couple of other, I think the story of that game was one, yes, of course, the first inning has to be talked about. But then the other part, there was at least 3, if not 4, real opportunities, like 3 or 4 separate innings where the Yankees had runners on second, third base, and they just couldn't come up with the timely hit, whether it be Walker getting out of the jam, some of the relief pitchers getting out of the jam. That was the story to me in game 1. Of course, Diaz coming in for the 4-out save at the end. I'm curious to get your take on the Gallo situation, because it seems like Yankee fans were divided on that. Boone bringing up Gallo in that spot.
See, here's my take on this. I get why Aaron Boone did this, and he said in his press conference, I wanted to make sure Diaz was going to get a 4-out save because we didn't want to have to worry about him tomorrow. Well, here's one problem with that thinking. Yeah, Joey Gallo was an interesting choice based off of his reputation and back of the baseball cards, but that's one of the things I hate when I hear people say, oh, play to the back of the baseball cards. Looking at Joey Gallo this year, he's batting well under the Mendoza line. He'll hit home runs, but those seem to happen like once in a blue moon. And whenever he comes up, it's pretty much an automatic strikeout. So in that sense, no, it really did not make sense to me, especially when you had IKF, who, granted, he made that boneheaded base running mistake getting picked off, but
he had 2 hits or 3.
Still went 2 for 3.
Yeah.
And the problem with that wasn't so much that you pinch hit him. You ended up replacing Gallo with Marwin Gonzalez in the top of the inning for defense. Obviously, you weren't going to put Joey Gallo there. So, in essence, not only did you pinch hit your shortstop for a hitter who has been very cold, but you essentially wasted two guys.
Yeah, I personally could see it from both sides. One, you didn't know for a fact that Diaz was coming in, but the fact that Diaz did come in, the way I could at least see it from Boone's perspective, you're down by 2 runs at the time. You have IKF coming up, and then you got, I think it was Trevino on deck. Two guys who are known, if they're gonna get a hit, it's more than likely gonna be a single. And I think Boone looks at it like, what's more probable? Me being able to put together 3 straight hits against arguably the best closer in all of baseball in Edwin Diaz, or Diaz making one mistake and Gallo hitting it out of the park. So I understood it. I don't think either scenario probably would have worked because Diaz has just been that good this year. I think he should be getting Cy Young votes, but I just thought it was interesting. I saw a lot of Yankee fans going crazy about it after the game. The double steal was another questionable decision, even though he was safe. Had he been able to stay on the bag, I don't know if I love that decision. Also, another spot in the game that I think a lot of Yankee fans weren't in love with was when Boone gave, I think it was Rizzo, the green light on 3-0 after he had just walked Aaron Judge on 4 straight pitches, I think it was. So even though it almost resulted in a grand slam. So there was a lot of questionable things in that game that had they gone a different way, obviously it could have been a different result.
Yeah, 100%. But going on to game 2, I think Max Scherzer had one of those key performances that, let's face it, this was one of those types of performances that you were looking for when you got Max Scherzer. And if I'm in your shoes, is this one of those signs that's obviously encouraging to you going forward with the Mets in these big games?
Yeah, I think this was great. I was super excited. Listen, I don't like the Yankees, but I certainly don't hate them.
Right.
Like,
of course.
I'm indifferent about the Yankees. I think like a lot of Yankee fans think like they were like raining on our parade all over Twitter. They're like, "Oh, that's your World Series." No, it's not our World Series. No. We're excited. We beat a crosstown rival. You see the atmosphere. Both fan bases are very passionate about it. It was an exciting time. But in terms of, I think this is a test that was important and necessary for the New York Mets to kind of put themselves in that type of situation. Scherzer's, of course, been there before. But Diaz, the growth for him in that spot, getting a 4-out save against the New York Yankees, Aaron Judge coming up, that was huge for his development. As far as Max goes, man, that's what we're paying him for, man. I expect him, when the lights shine brightest, to come out and get the job done. And that's exactly what he did. I mean, the guy's actually gotten better since he's come back from the injury. He's quickly become probably my favorite player on the team. I just love how intense he is on the mound. He's awesome.
Oh, yeah, I love it. And look, I hate to say this, but as a Yankee fan, I've been wanting that guy for a long time, and I still think one of the biggest mistakes that the Yankees made was not even going after him when he became a free agent after the 2014 season. But that's a Yankee rant for probably another episode, and probably one I could even make a whole video about. But in any event, another guy who I think made a big difference in this series was probably one of your other biggest acquisitions over the offseason. That's Starling Marte. Right. Hit that big home run in the first inning. And of course, he ends up getting the game-winning hit at the end of that second game. How have you been feeling about Starling Marte over the course of the season? I think he's definitely been an important bat that's really made a difference in your lineup.
Yeah, I think I saw a stat. I think it was the 15th walk-off hit in the Subway Series, which, if that's true, that's ridiculous. That's a very high amount. Or I think that's what I read. And I think the Mets have had 9, or maybe come from behind wins in the 9th inning. I don't know, whatever it was. It was a crazy stat. But as far as Marte goes, listen, I was thrilled when the Mets brought in Marte. I actually thought, from an outsider's perspective for the Yankees, I thought that was the guy you guys should have went after last year instead of Joey Gallo. I thought he would have been a perfect fit for your lineup. And when the Mets brought in Starling Marte, I was thrilled because he brings a different dynamic to this offense. He's a guy that can kind of do a little bit of everything. Really good defender. He could hit for high average. He's got some speed. He's got some sneaky power. And he just brings a different element to this Mets offense. And it's what I think the Mets still need one power righty bat. Like, I think they need that. But other than that, I think we have a very balanced lineup, and Marte has a lot to do with that. And yeah, he had a huge series. He's batting 300 this year. I mean, he's been terrific for the Mets. Absolutely terrific. And his defense is great as well. That's another thing that has stood out to me. not just in this series, but throughout the entirety of the year. The Mets defense this year, I feel like it doesn't get enough credit. The Mets defense is really good. It's one of the better defenses I've seen this club have since I've been watching the team.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think it's funny. Tom is going to hate me for praising on this guy because I know that he's not one of the biggest Francisco Lindor fans out there. But, if you really look past his average, which I believe it's at 250,
he's over 250 now, finally.
It's a little over 250. So it gets kind of hit or miss. I still think he's been an important player on your team. Not so much just because he's still been able to drive in a lot of runs, but I think his defense at shortstop also helps. So to your point right there, I completely agree with you.
Yeah, there's times with Lindor where he will make really boneheaded decisions. You saw it in the second game where he got picked off, and there's times where he makes boneheaded decisions in the field. But in terms of just like his range and his defensive ability, he's very good. And the other thing that I'll say about Lindor that I really notice, he is a great, and I know he got into the scuffle last year with McNeil when they said there was like a squirrel or a raccoon or whatever it was. But he is a great guy in the clubhouse. Anytime, like he's the first guy off the bench that's celebrating and congratulating everybody, which is what you want in your leaders. Has he been a little underwhelming? I suppose a little bit, but he still played pretty well this year. It's just that he gets paid so much money, so he's held to such a high standard.
Yeah, no, of course. And obviously another key takeaway was Pete Alonso, even though obviously he's not been one of the main stories of the Stubway series, he still continues to drive in runs. And fun fact, I think he might actually have more RBIs than Aaron Judge, if you can believe that.
He does. He has 84, I think.
Yep.
And the other thing, I'll say this, in the first game specifically, the Yankees were making great pitches to Alonso. It wasn't like he was getting hanging sliders. These were pitches like below his knees. He was going down and slamming them for doubles. Pete looked really locked in this series. I know he had the home run in the second game, but I actually thought he looked more impressive in the first because the Yankees were making pitches, and he was still driving the ball really hard. So Pete looked really good in this series.
Yeah, definitely. And I think he's probably going to be getting a lot of MVP votes as the season winds down and he plays in more big games if he continues this production.
Yeah, I don't think he'll win it. I think it'll probably go to Goldschmidt, who's been incredible this year. I think he's batting like 335, and he's gotten about the same amount of home runs. But he's definitely going to get votes, and he's definitely going to put his name in the hat. I mean, he's been the guy as far as our offense goes. I could at least argue, I think Edwin Diaz is our MVP. But in terms of the bat, because another crazy statistic. The Mets this year, when leading after 8 innings, are 55-0. They have not lost a game when leading after 8 innings this entire year.
What? That is a stat that I never thought I'd hear from your team. No offense, but only because every time I think of the Mets, one of my common phrases that I've said with them is death taxes and a bad bullpen. And now with Edwin Diaz being arguably one of the best closers in the game this year, I think that's definitely true. And what do you think has been a big change that you noticed over the course of the past few years with Edwin Diaz? Because I remember a couple years ago, you kept hearing people calling him Ed Luz. And if you really look at some of the blown saves he had in 2019, which was kind of an underrated Met team, if he had saved half those games, I think they're probably in the playoffs.
2019 Met team was good. I mean, JD Davis was really good that year. Dom Smith was really good that year. The lineup was really good that year. But yes, like you said, Diaz pitched to a 5.5 ERA. The bullpen as a whole, the starting pitching wasn't, terrific. But that year, of course, as a Mets fan, I was furious. I mean, we gave up a ton of our best prospects to bring him in along with Robinson Cano, which clearly didn't work out. But Diaz was the main part of that trade. And, his first year, he pitched to a 5.5 ERA after he was the best closer in all baseball with Seattle the year before. If you look back at that season, in fairness to Diaz, it was a lot of bad luck. He was making a lot of good pitches, and hitters were just knocking the ball out of the park. But I do think a lot of it had to do with the mental aspect as well. It's not easy to play in New York. We know that as Met and Yankee fans. I go back to Carlos Beltran, man. His first year with the Mets, he struggled. Then he came around in his second year, and I think a lot of that had to do with his mental psyche, getting used to playing under the bright lights, with the media and the fans in New York. So that probably played into it as well with Diaz. And then after that, Diaz kind of started to find his stride. I hear people all the time tell me, oh, Diaz is finally good this year. No, Diaz has been really good 2020, 2021. This year, he is just literally, I've been watching the Mets religiously for about 26 years, the best closer I've ever seen in a Mets uniform this year for one single year. But he's been really good for the Mets the 2 previous years. It's just that this year, I think he's the best closer in baseball. He is just taking it to another level.
So I have a few more comments I want to put up, and fittingly, again, from Tom. Tom says, thanks, guys. LGM, baby. Okay, I'm not going to agree with the second part of that statement, but Tom, once again, we appreciate you and everything you have done for Review and Preview. And obviously, I don't know if I'm speaking for Chris here, but we both cannot wait to talk some Giants football in the coming months. And
oh, man.
hey,
Dude, today, I went to training camp today. So I was like,
oh, how was that?
Yeah, it was awesome. I'm gonna go live at 8:40, so I'm gonna talk about it. But it was awesome. It got me back in the mood for football, man. Like I needed a breather. I need to enjoy my summer. I don't want to just talk Giants just to talk Giants when there's nothing to talk about. But going to training camp, seeing the team out there, even though you can't get much of a feel for how the team's gonna do in a non-padded practice, it was just cool, man, to be amongst the fans, and it was a lot of fun.
Anyways, Tom has another question for you. He wants to know your thoughts on the Daniel Vogelback trade.
I like it. I like it on the with a contingent, with if it's not our only big move, right? I like the move, but we need more, specifically in the lineup. Vogelback hits righties really well. We know that. That's why the New York Mets brought him in, basically to replace Dom Smith. But we need a guy to replace J.D. Davis. We need a righty bat. So as long as they bring in another bat and bolster the bullpen, which I think is our biggest need right now. We need like an 8th inning guy, a bridge guy to get to Diaz, which I think we'll do. I'm hoping it's Dave Robertson. Maybe they get Contreras. Maybe it's a package deal there. I'd love Mancini. I just don't know if the Orioles are going to trade him at this point. But I like Vogelbach, but he's a platoon player. He's not going to play every day.
Yeah, no, I think that totally makes sense. Mancini's another guy who I pretty much heard in a lot of trade rumors, but if you got D-Rob, man, that would be interesting if you took Houdini. He obviously, as a Yankee fan, I know he might make things a little interesting for you. I mean, remember, there's a reason why I call him Houdini. He used to put runners on base all the time. He drove me nuts, but more often than not, at least he got out of jams. And not to mention, we know that he's pitched in New York, so I think he definitely would be a fit, although personally I would also love to have a D-Rob reunion. But in any event, yeah, I think those points totally make sense. And I think there's one other person we really have to talk about who has impacted the Mets at a very positive angle, and that would be the manager, the one, the only, William Nathaniel Showalter III, who you probably know as Buck. And yeah, I remember as a former Yankee manager.
Yeah, man, I was thrilled when we brought in Buck Showalter because the last couple of Mets managers were kind of unproven guys that didn't really have a lot of experience in the big leagues. You got our last manager now as your third base coach with Rojas, and then before that we had Mickey Callaway, who was I think he was a pitching coach with the Cleveland Guardians now, who clearly wasn't a very good manager either. When the Mets brought in Buck Showalter, I was all about Girardi. Like 4 years ago when they brought in Mickey, I wanted Girardi because that was my line of thinking. I want a proven manager, a guy that is a good baseball mind. And the Mets kind of went more with the analytical approach and a guy that they could control. When they brought in Buck, I was thrilled. And you could really see the impact he has on this baseball team. The way that he handles the bullpen is terrific. I go back to last year with Rojas. Castro, the guy that you guys traded for in your bullpen, I think he's hurt right now for you guys, who was with the Mets last year. Rojas ran him into the ground. By 6 weeks in, he had a dead arm because he was pitching every day. Buck Showalter has done a terrific job in terms of managing the innings for the bullpen, not making one game too important at the risk of, ruining the rest of the season. So he's done a great job with that. There are times I question his lineup, his alignments from within the lineup. I don't necessarily love where he bats Jeff McNeil sometimes, but overall, man, Buck has been terrific. I think I don't know if he'll win it. Probably the Orioles manager stands a good chance, but I think Buck needs to be in the discussion for manager of the year.
Well, fortunately, manager of the year is given out to 2 different leagues, so at least
that's right. That's right. Yeah.
At least he won't be competing with Brandon Hyde there. I would probably argue that Brandon Hyde is probably my AL manager of the year. But yeah, as far as NL manager of the years goes, I mean, with the way the Mets have turned around, you look at where they were a year ago and you look at all the different managers they've had. Yeah, it's hard. It's really tough to understate the difference that he has made with the New York Mets. And this is really, I would say, probably the first time in my lifetime that the Mets have had the better manager than the Yankees. I mean, look, you saw what happened the first game of that series. Aaron Boone got outmanaged badly by Buck Showalter, and it's not. And batting Joey Gallo as a pinch hitter doesn't necessarily help matters either, but nonetheless, really impressive what Buck Showalter has done. Taking a team that I think we pretty much knew that they had the talent like the past few years. It wasn't like they were like some like schlub team. I think they just needed someone who was old school, wasn't like too analytical, but like was also someone that could have a feel for the game. And that's pretty much what the Mets have right there. And
the other thing I'll say about Buck, and I can't remember the exact rule it was at the time. This is like over a month or two ago. There was like an obscure rule that like no one knew about, and Buck called him out on it. Like one of the managers on the other team did something that you wouldn't even think to question. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it technically was against the rules. And he is just a guy that knows every inch of the rule book in Major League Baseball, and he just comes across a guy that is just super prepared game to game, which I don't think the Mets have had with their manager for a long time, to be honest with you.
Do you actually want to know why I think that really came with Buck, like with knowing the rule book? I think a lot of that had to do with his days when like he was coaching like the Yankees in his younger years, and he credited Billy Martin as a mentor. If you really look at how Billy Martin managed, like he was another manager that had a really insane attention to detail, like knew a lot of the rules inside and out. And I think that might be one place where Buck learned that, or at least that's my little hypothesis.
You're probably right. I always thought Buck kind of got a raw deal with the Yankees. I'll say that.
Oh yeah.
He probably would have won those World Series in '96. Torrey was great. I'm not discounting him, but I always thought he got a raw deal there, and I was always super impressed with what he did with the Orioles too. He got them to nearly 100 wins, I think. Like got him to the playoffs. They had 4 straight winning seasons. They haven't approached that since he's left. But yeah, I've always been really impressed with Buck. I think he's one of the better managers in baseball.
And one of my commenters agrees with you. Clark Posha, one of my longtime family friends. What a difference a real experienced professional manager makes, along with quality players like Marte and Canna. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I would definitely have to agree with him, at least for your sake, with that last part of the sentence. Thank goodness that Pat Apple Baez is gone. Gosh, do you think Detroit regrets signing him to that contract now? I mean,
yeah.
All he's done is either been injured, have like maybe 1 or 2 good stretches for a Tigers team that really has had literally everything go wrong. And, and whenever like he's at bat, he often just strikes out. And I think
he's basically he's a little bit better, but he's basically Gallo from the right side in terms of his plate approach. The guy strikes out a ton. He's a and don't get me wrong, he was really good for the Mets offensively last year. The second half that we had him, he's a really good defensive player. But he also just wouldn't, now that I've seen this season unfold in terms of like the type of lineup the Mets have, Baez wouldn't have fit. He wouldn't have fit with what the Mets were looking to do. That's the other thing that Buck has brought to this team. He has brought a clear game plan. Jeff McNeil has completely changed his approach at the plate this year. He has gone back to the Jeff McNeil from 2019. They're a team that's going to try to extend bats. Every time Kana comes up, a guy that the Mets brought in, he led the league, I believe, with the A's the previous year in pitches per at bat. They have hitters that extend at bats. Brandon Nimmo, another one. I don't think Baez would have fit what we were looking to do, and I think that had a lot to do with why we let him go.
Oh, yeah, no. I completely agree. Baez is literally one of the ultimate examples of a typical free swinger who doesn't really take too many walks. And that was pretty much true when he was with the Chicago Cubs too. And, even when the Mets acquired him, I kind of saw some risk in getting Javi Baez based on that alone. And Clark continues bunting, hitting the opposite way, long at bats, etc. That's what Buck preaches. Yep. The Mets don't swing garbage anymore. Yeah, look, I think a lot of that is some of the same philosophies that he used with the Yankees back in, like, say, the late 80s when he was, like, in a minor league coach and he worked his way up to being a manager up to now where he's with the Mets team that, as we mentioned, a lot of great players on the team. And I really don't think it's any coincidence that they have become much more fundamentally sound with him as their manager. And yeah, I'm going to go on a limb and say this is probably the first year since maybe say 1986 or 1990 that, like, the Mets have had the better manager.
Here's what I'll say about this Mets team. I've been watching the Mets religiously since about 96. I was born in 85. Probably started getting really into them when I was like 10 or 11. When Piazza got here, like, it was my be-all, end-all. I watched every game.
Right.
And I've been a diehard ever since in 98. And this, I truly believe this. With a healthy Jacob deGrom, this is the best Mets team they've had since I've been watching the team.
Wow.
I truly believe that. When I factor in everything, when I factor in the starting pitching, the overall defense, the lineup, we need a little help in the bullpen. But you go back to the 99 team, for example. The 99 team, one of my favorite Mets teams of all time. The lineup was terrific. Ricky Henderson batted .325 that year. Cedeno stole 66 bases. John Olerud was terrific. Mike Piazza, Edgardo Alfonso, one of my favorite Mets of all time. But the starting pitching was not there. We had Masato Yoshi. We had Al Leiter was really our only proven starter. Rick Reed was pretty good, but we didn't have top-tier starting pitching. This team, to me, is more complete. 2000, the lineup got worse. We lost John Olerud. You had better pitching. You brought in Mike Hampton. 2006 was a great team, probably the best team in baseball that year, but the starting pitching fell apart throughout the course of the season. Pedro Martinez didn't pitch in the playoffs. We had a depleted start. I mean, we were starting John Maine and Oliver Perez come playoff time. We had a great lineup, but I don't think it was as well-rounded of a team as this. And then in 2015, it came out to bite us, man. The biggest Achilles heel on that team all year was our defense. Our defense was horrible. Lucas Duda couldn't field to save his life. Wilmer Flores was horrible. And the Mets kind of skated by with the power pitching because they were striking everybody out in the first couple rounds. But then when they went up against a team that could put the ball in play with the Kansas City Royals, you saw what happened. Our defense cost us that World Series. So, yeah, I really believe that. I think this team it very well could be the most well-rounded Mets team since I've been watching the team.
Yeah, those are interesting points. Like, I was thinking about it a lot, too, this year. I think really the only team, because obviously I'm too young to remember the 99 and the 2000. The only Mets team really in my mind that sticks out as being like one of the best, like, was probably the 06 team. And I thought that team should have won the World Series. And yeah, no, definitely. That team, great lineup, Delgado, Beltran. You had Wright and Reyes when they were young.
Well,
the pitching rotation, like you said, I think if they had a healthy Pedro and maybe even a healthy Duque,
if they had Santana on that team, they got Santana in 2008. If they got Johan Santana in 2006, they would have won the World Series. They needed that top end pitcher.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. I totally agree with that take. And Clark says we couldn't overcome that KC bullpen in 2015. I think the other problem I think was the fielding errors that happened in that game. But yeah, the Kansas City bullpen, probably one of the strongest group of arms that I've seen, at least if we're talking about relief pitching wise.
Oh, all three of those guys could have been the best closer in baseball in that team. That team was loaded. And Familia was great all year, so I don't want to rag on the guy, but he fell apart. He blew the save in game one, very reminiscent of the 2000 Subway Series against the Yankees. We blew game one. We blew the save in the first game, and it changed the whole complexion of that series, and it was the same thing with the Royals.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that was really the only, looking back at that World Series, though, I think that was the only save that really was one save that was really his fault. Because when you look at game four, that was Tyler Clippard was the one who created the mess. And then game five was probably the controversial Terry Collins decision, which in retrospect may have been the beginning of the end, the whole Matt Harvey thing.
And I loved Matt Harvey that night, man. I was so pumped up, man. He pitched his ass off. And I had no problem with Terry letting him go out there for the ninth. Right. But once he walks that guy, you get him the hell out of there. Yes. You don't let him pitch to the next guy. That was the mistake. And I love Terry Collins, one of my favorite managers in Mets history. But that was a big mistake at a big moment. He couldn't do that.
Oh, no. Look, I agree. It was a bad mistake by Terry Collins, but otherwise I think he might have been – I think he's one of the more underrated managers in Mets history, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And anyway, speaking of the Mets, and getting a little bit back to the current squad, I'm looking at the schedule right now for the New York Mets. So obviously you're going to Miami for 3 games, but now I turn to August. And August, oy vey, that is going to be one hell of a gauntlet. And I'm going to read off these opponents in order. You got the Nationals, who there is no excuse for you not to take 2 out of 3 from the Nationals.
We got the Marlins before the Nationals.
Yes, Marlins for the Nationals. No reason they shouldn't go 4 out of 6 in that. And then here's where the fun starts. You got the 5-game series against the Braves, including a doubleheader on Saturday, 3 games against the Reds, and then you got a 4-game series against the Braves in Atlanta, sandwiched in between 2 against the Phillies. And then after the one in Philadelphia, we rematch in the Bronx, and you got the Rockies for 4 afterwards, and then you got the Dodgers.
Yeah.
That is going to be one hell of a litmus test going forward for the New York Mets in August. And Chris, I got to ask you, on a scale of 1 to 10, what is your confidence level at for the New York Mets?
9. I'm very confident in this team right now. And that may change in a week. You know, Mets fans are they're a rare breed, man. We're like bipolar, but right now I'm very confident in this team, and I think they're going to make more acquisitions at the deadline to improve this team. But I'm looking at these next 11 games. Before I get to the rest of that part of that schedule, we got Alcantara tomorrow, so that's going to be tough. But if we could beat Alcantara tomorrow, I want 5 out of 6. If we lose to Alcantara, which is acceptable, 4 to 6 between the Marlins and the Nationals, right? I'm hoping we could pick up another game over these next 6 games. I don't think that's crazy to think we could against the Atlanta Braves. If we can win 4 out of 5 out of these next 6, and if we have a 4-game lead going into that series, we have an opportunity to put this division to bed or close to bed if we can win 4 out of 5 home against the Braves. That gives you a 7-game lead with what do we got with about 56 games to go. I would feel very confident at that point. So these next 11 games are super important, and the Mets have to build off of this momentum they've gotten from this Yankee series and really put the pedal to the metal. They're playing 2 weak opponents, and then they got to get ready for the Atlanta Braves.
Yeah, for sure. And hey, I like your confidence right there. I mean, look, all year long, I've been one of those guys that's been thinking that the Atlanta Braves are the team to beat in the division. And look, again, this isn't like me.
Well, they're the defending champs.
Yeah, no, of course. I still think they're the team to beat. Like, until like the Braves show me that like they're a team that cannot like compete and like finish in first place, like I still say it's going to be Atlanta, but my mind could easily be changed depending on how the Mets play in August. Because
I think those first 11 games is going to decide your mind. I mean, if they beat up on the Braves, you're going to change your mind real quick.
If you win that 5 game, if you win 4 out of 5 in that 5-game series, then you might as well they might as well give you that division.
That's what I'm saying. So that it's such a big. I'm so pumped up for that Braves series, and it's good to get the rivalry back. In the late 90s, early 2000s, I think it was right there with the Yankees Red Sox rival. It was great. It was must-watch TV every time they played, and I'm great. I'm really happy that it seems to be coming back. It's going to be a really fun last 2 months of the season. But yeah, I'm confident. Even if the Mets don't win the division, which obviously I want to, and it's going to be so important to be able to get that bye so you can set up your rotation. You avoid the Dodgers until the NLCS. But even if they don't win the division, if we have a healthy Jake, and you got Jake and Max, I give us a chance against anybody come playoff time. Even if we got to play in that wild card round, I think we have a team that is built very well for playoff baseball, especially if we get an 8th-inning guy. You get Jake, you got Max, the way Walker's pitched this year, Bassett in the 4, and you have arguably the best closer in baseball to close out the game. So get me to the playoffs. Obviously, I want to get the bye. I want to win the division. It would give us a much better chance of getting to where we need to get to. But I'm going to be confident no matter what if we have a healthy Jake with Max to top this rotation, even if it's via the wild card.
Yeah, no. So the Dodgers too. Imagine the Mets and Dodgers ends up being a big series too, come like October. Like Clayton Kershaw and Max Scherzer pitching against a team who he was briefly with like the year before, and then of course, personally for me, now I think you and I both would have an interesting scenario if. Now, I don't want to get too in my head of myself, but a Subway Series were to happen. Now, look, if I were old enough to like know baseball in 2000, because remember, I was only like 4 years old that year, I have a feeling I probably would have gotten so much agita based on all the circumstances at that time and based on what had been going on during that season.
Yeah.
I think that would definitely be very insane, especially when you consider the fact that New York sports for like the past decade has been like going,
Well,
in the doldrums.
we're starting to get back to it though. Just not this team.
Well, hey, at least I got my Rangers though. They made a good conference finals run. I think that was a team that really kickstarted it.
Yeah, for sure. And hopefully the Knicks get Donovan Mitchell. They give us a little confidence there. We'll see.
Yes, absolutely. So, yeah, I think all that thoughts, like with both of our teams being in, I think, look, regardless of what we think about each other's teams, the fact of the matter is when both of them are good at the same time, which is rare because I think the last time I can really think of that happening where both of them were like extremely competitive was probably, I would say probably the 2006 season, since both of them finished with the same record. And then obviously you had the 1999 and 2000. Those were seasons.
I was going to say 99, 2000 was really,
those are seasons I wish I was old enough to remember.
Was really the last time that I felt both teams had a legitimate shot to win a World Series was 99, 2000. And we're back at it. We are now in that 99, 2000 phase where, yeah, both the Mets and I think they're two of the top four favorites to win the World Series, which is rare, like you said, and I definitely think it is good for baseball and definitely obviously good for the New York area, but baseball in general. I mean, the most diehard fan bases when it comes to baseball, it's the Northeast, along with obviously the St. Louis fan base, which is incredible. But in general, the Northeast, the Red Sox, the Mets, the Yankees, that's where the heartland is for baseball. So when the Mets and Yankees are both clicking, I think it's great for the sport.
Absolutely. I'm also going to throw 1985 in there. That was kind of a season that doesn't really get talked about enough since both of them like finished with good records. I believe the Yankees won 97 games, Mets won 98. Obviously, we know what the Mets did a year later, but both of them were right in the thick of things, and people forget how the city was like turned on by both of them. But in any event, before I let you go and before I end the show, I do have one more question that, again, I'm kind of borrowing from Big Blue Avenue whenever Tom, Sam, and I will have like an opposing fan base guest on. But I'm going to throw this question to you, going back a little bit to the Subway Series. And again, this is a fun question. If you could steal any Yankee from this roster and put him on the Mets, who would it be?
It's hard not to say Aaron Judge. It's very hard not to say Aaron Judge. I would say just for the way the Mets team is built, I think it's Judge. I mean, if we didn't have a stud pitcher, I'd probably say Garrett Cole. But I'm confident enough in our starting pitching that I wouldn't go with him. I think it's got to be Judge. If not him, it may be Holmes to be the eighth inning guy for Diaz. But I think it's got to be Aaron Judge, man. He's you stick his bat in our lineup with Pete Alonso, it would be 4th of July. So I'd have to go Aaron Judge, especially the way he's played this year.
I think for me, I might have said a different answer the last time, like when I like answered this question myself, when I did my NL East like rundown, when I had Tom and Paul and Noah on that show. But I would probably go with Brandon Nimmo because I love having an outfielder that can, hit for average, which is pretty much why I'm happy that the Yankees just got Andrew Benintendi. But with that being said, I would also have to consider Edwin Diaz because, look, as much as I like Clay Holmes, like, look at the way Edwin Diaz is dominating.
Did you see the movement on those fastballs? I've been watching Edwin Diaz all year. That was the best he's looked. That
couldn't hurt to have another bullpen arm in there, no?
What did you say?
Couldn't hurt to have another bullpen arm there, no?
Oh, for sure. always would like another bullpen arm, especially come playoff time.